My husband said, "I poisoned you." He thought I was dying. What he didn't know, I own the hospital he just drove past, and everything he said was already being recorded. He was standing on a gravel shoulder off Route 74, somewhere in the hills above Lake Elsinore, with the passenger door of his Mercedes open and my body half collapsed against the tire. My legs had given out. My hands wouldn't close. My mouth tasted like metal and dry wine. And my husband of 11 years, the man who had held my hand at my mother's funeral in 2019, was looking down at me the way a man looks at a task he's trying to finish before his favorite show comes on. I did not beg. I did not cry. I already knew what my left wrist was doing under my sleeve. And I knew, with a clarity the poison couldn't reach, that the woman driving the white Escalade 0.4 miles behind us had been listening to every single word of this conversation for the last 11 minutes. My name is Brooke Haverson. I'm 47 years old. And this is the story of how my husband tried to kill me for $47 million, drove past the only hospital in 3 counties that I personally owned, and made the single worst mistake of his 49 years on this earth. I live in a hillside house on Camino Alto in Rancho Santa Fe, California. The house is stucco and clay tile, built in 1987, with a wraparound patio that looks west over the back nine of a golf course I've never played. I bought the house in 2014 with money I earned, not inherited, not married into, not gifted. Earned. My father was a ranch foreman in Paso Robles. My mother taught kindergarten for 34 years at the same elementary school on Vine Street. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house with a kitchen that smelled like pinto beans and cast iron and the kind of financial discipline that teaches a kid exactly how long a dollar has to stretch. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I paid for San Diego State by working 40 hours a week at a residential care home in Spring Valley, an Alzheimer's facility run by a woman named Adelita Mendoza, who taught me that a well-run memory care unit was the hardest and most sacred kind of healthcare anyone could build. I spent the next 22 years building exactly that. I built a healthcare company from nothing, and by the time he tried to kill me, it was worth millions. My chief medical officer, Dr. Marisol Vega, has been with me since 2013. My chief operating officer, Alma Ruiz, has been with me since 2014. My general counsel, Priya Banerjee, has been with me since 2016. These are the 3 women I trust most on this planet. They are about to become the most important characters in this story. If you've ever trusted someone with something that mattered, stay with me. I married Grant Lawson on September 16, 2014. He was 38, I was 36. He was charming, he was tall. He'd had a minor career in tech sales, 2 failed startups, a venture-backed company he'd been pushed out of in 2013, a book of business that sounded impressive on paper and evaporated whenever you asked for specifics. I wasn't looking for a co-founder. I wasn't looking for a partner in my business. I had my business. What I was looking for, at 36, running 130 beds and 180 employees, was a person to come home to. Someone who'd ask about my day and not flinch when the answer involved a staffing crisis or a sundowning episode or a family meeting with a woman trying to decide whether to put her father on hospice. Grant was good at that. For a while. My attorney Priya drafted the prenup. Every premarital asset stayed mine. Every business interest stayed mine. Any asset growth from premarital holdings stayed mine. Grant signed it without a complaint. He said, and I believed him at the time, "Brooke, I'm not here for your money. I'm here for you." He said it in a restaurant on Prospect Avenue in La Jolla. I remember the light through the window. I remember thinking, I'm lucky. I was wrong. He was here for the money. He just didn't know it yet. For the first 5 years, Grant was fine. Not great. Fine. He attended events. He shook hands. He made small talk at galas. He told people he was in business development, a phrase that means nothing and requires no follow-up. He'd try new ventures every 18 months or so. A consulting firm, a sports tech idea, a short-lived restaurant investment. None of them worked. All of them bled money, my money, eventually, because Grant hadn't made his own in years. I didn't notice how much was bleeding until 2024. Then things started adding up. Money missing. A second phone. Late nights that made no sense. And one day, I realized I wasn't being lied to. I was being prepared. February 2024. My CPA Henry Lynn called on a Tuesday. He said, "Brooke, I'm seeing $23,000 in cash advances on the joint Amex over the last 6 months. I want to make sure that's you." It wasn't me. I asked Grant. He said it was a temporary bridge for a consulting deal. He said he'd pay it back by April. He didn't. April 2024. Our housekeeper Consuela found a second phone in Grant's car while she was vacuuming. She brought it to me, hands shaking. She thought she was saving my marriage. She was saving my life. I put it back exactly where she'd found it, and I called Priya that afternoon and said, "I think we need to quietly document everything." Priya said, "Brooke, I've been waiting for this call for 2 years." July 2024. Grant started having late work events on Tuesday nights. He wasn't employed. He didn't have work events. He came home smelling like a cologne I hadn't bought him and a perfume that wasn't mine. October 2024. My bookkeeper flagged 3 wire transfers from a joint checking account to a Nevada LLC I didn't recognize, Silver Ridge Holdings. $14,000, $22,000, $31,000. I asked Grant. He said it was a short-term loan to a friend. I said, "Which friend?" He said, "You don't know him." December 2024. I walked into Grant's home office while he was in the shower. His laptop was open. A collections email was visible on the screen. Past due, $127,000. I closed the laptop. I went downstairs. I poured myself a glass of water and drank it slowly at the kitchen sink. And I stood there for a long time and I watched my reflection in the dark window above the sink, and I said quietly to the woman looking back at me, "Okay, Brooke. Okay." Now we begin. January 2025. I asked Priya to quietly update my will. Priya said, "Brooke, your current will names Grant as primary beneficiary. Do you want to change that?" I said, "No." She looked at me over her reading glasses. I said, "Leave it as it is. But add a pour-over provision that says, if I die under any circumstance involving law enforcement investigation, the estate passes instead to the Arbor Grove Employee Trust. Every penny, every share, everything goes to the 487 people who actually built this with me." Priya nodded slowly. She said, "You think it could go that far?" I said, "I hope I'm wrong, but yes, I think it could go that far." She updated the will on January 19th, 2025. The version Grant eventually found in the safe in March was the decoy, the one that kept him as sole beneficiary. The real will, the one Priya held in her office safe, had the pour-over clause. I'd been preparing for 14 months. February 2025. I activated an audio recording shortcut on my Apple Watch. A one-tap automation that, on the double tap of the side button, would begin a continuous audio recording to an encrypted iCloud folder owned by Arbor Grove's IT department, with timestamps and location data attached. I practiced it 3 times a week. I never told Grant. March 2025. I briefed Alma. I said, "Alma, if I ever text you the word nightcap, I need you to ping my location and follow from a distance. Do not engage, just be there. If I don't reply to a check-in within 90 minutes of that text, alert Priya and Dr. Vega." "Is that clear?" Alma said, "Brooke." "Is he going to hurt you?" I said. "I don't know, I just want to be sure. Is that clear?" She said, "It's clear." That was 13 months before the dinner at the harbor. I first heard about Jenna in September 2025. Alma's 22-year-old niece worked at a designer boutique at Fashion Valley. One Saturday afternoon, she texted Alma a photograph, taken casually, from across the store of a man who looked a lot like Grant, standing very close to a young blonde woman at the register. Laughing, hand on her back. The young woman was wearing an Arbor Grove employee polo. Not from any of our facilities, a counterfeit. Alma brought me the photograph on Monday morning. I said, "Hire someone." We hired Bernadette Okoye, a licensed PI out of Mission Valley. Bernadette worked for 6 months. She produced a 41-page report. The young woman's name was Jenna Reed, 22 years old, clerk at a designer boutique, dreamed of opening a cafe. Grant had been seeing her since March 2025. He had promised her a downtown apartment. He had promised her a cafe. He had promised her a life. Jenna did not know Grant was married. He had told her he was divorcing a controlling older woman. He had told her his wife was a mid-level manager at a nursing home. Jenna was a victim too. The thing Bernadette could not explain, the piece I didn't have, was how Grant planned to get from secretly cheating on Brooke to openly living with Jenna. The prenup protected me. Divorce gave him nothing. He had no assets. He had $537,000 in combined debt across 7 lenders and 2 gambling accounts. The numbers didn't add up. Not until Priya called me on March 3, 2026 and said, "Brooke, I just got a call from Wells Fargo's wealth management compliance desk. A man matching Grant's description attempted to open a joint survivorship account in your name and his this morning. He didn't have your signature. They flagged it." Then I understood. Grant wasn't planning to divorce me. Grant was planning to bury me. I drove home that afternoon. I walked into Grant's home office. I opened the wall safe. He didn't know I knew the code. I'd watched him enter it on our anniversary in 2018, and I pulled out my will. My clean will. The one that named him sole beneficiary. The paper had a small crease on the lower left corner that hadn't been there in January. Someone had handled it, photographed it, folded it back. I put it back exactly where it was. I closed the safe. I drove to Priya's office. I sat down across from her and I said, "He found it. He knows he's sole beneficiary under the clean will. He doesn't know about the pour-over. He's going to try something." Priya looked at me for a very long time. Then she said, "Brooke, we have a choice. We call the sheriff today. We file a restraining order. We move you into protective housing. Or we let him make the move, and we catch him doing it." I said, "Priya, if I leave now, he runs. He leaves the country. I never get to look him in the eye." She said, "Brooke, I cannot advise this." I said, "I'm not asking for advice. I'm asking for coverage." She got me coverage. Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. Grant suggested dinner at Il Forno on the harbor in San Diego, our place. The restaurant where we'd celebrated the opening of Arbor Grove 5 in 2021, where we'd had anniversaries, where we'd sat on the patio watching the boats and pretending we were the people we'd been in 2015. When Grant said, "Let's have dinner at Il Forno this Tuesday," I said yes. At 3:47 p.m. that afternoon, I texted Alma one word: nightcap. She texted back, tracking, "Stay on comms." At 4:12 p.m., I met Dr. Vega at her office at Arbor Grove's Central Administrative Building in Myra Mesa. She performed a pre-exposure workup. Baseline vitals. Baseline tox panel, clean. Blood draw for comparison. "Brooke," she said, "whatever happens tonight, we will have a baseline from 4 hours before. Anything in your system above this line came from him. The lab will prove it." At 5:30 p.m., I put on a navy silk dress and black flats, not heels, flats, because I had a feeling I might need to walk, and I double-tapped the side button on my Apple Watch 3 times as a dry run. The recording started. The recording stopped. The file landed in the encrypted folder. Good. At 6:15 p.m., Grant and I drove to the harbor. He was in a good mood. He held doors. He kissed my hand when I got out of the car. He told the valet my dress was beautiful. A performance so smooth it would have fooled me 6 years ago. We were seated at a window table at 6:45 p.m. I ordered the grilled branzino and a glass of Sansera. Grant ordered a ribeye and an old-fashioned. We talked about a new facility I was scouting in Santa Barbara. He was attentive. He asked good questions. At 7:34 p.m., I excused myself to the restroom. At 7:35 p.m., while I was gone, Grant put 3/4 of a teaspoon of powdered diphenhydramine into my glass of Sansera. That's what the lab would later confirm. Approximately 3,200 milligrams. In a 140-pound woman, that's a dose that will kill you inside 3 hours without medical intervention. He chose it because he thought it would look like a cardiac event, an older woman, a busy CEO, a heart that simply stopped. He also didn't know that at 7:34:22 p.m. I double-tapped my Apple Watch in the restroom. The recording was running. I came back to the table at 7:37 p.m. Grant said, "I ordered you another wine, yours looked warm." That was the tell. He'd swapped the glasses. I picked it up. I raised it. I said to us, he said to us. I took a sip. I did not swallow. I held it in my mouth for 7 seconds while he drank his old-fashioned and smiled at me. Then, as if reaching for my napkin, I turned my head slightly and let the wine run out into the linen cloth folded on my lap. The napkin absorbed about 80% of it. I tasted bitter under the sweet, the diphenhydramine, unmistakable. I said, "This one's lovely." He smiled. Over the next 40 minutes, I performed the slow decline of a woman being poisoned. Slight headache at 8:04 p.m. Dizziness at 8:18 p.m. Pressing my fingers to my temple at 8:31 p.m. I took 3 more sips over that time, each one spat discreetly into the napkin. My actual diphenhydramine exposure that evening was the 8,100 milligrams I absorbed sublingually while holding it in my mouth. Enough to show up on a tox panel. Not enough to kill me. At 8:43 p.m. I said, "Grant, I feel lightheaded. Can we get some air?" He said, "Let's get you to the ER, sweetheart. I'll drive." I said, "Okay, thank you." I stood up. I let him steady me. And as we walked toward the door, I double-tapped my Apple Watch one more time under the table. The second recording window opened. Location data was live. And 0.4 miles away, an Escalade that belonged to my COO, idling at a gas station on Harbor Drive, pulled out into traffic 3 cars behind us. Grant did not drive toward the ER. He turned inland. He drove up I-15. He took Highway 74 east. He passed Scripps La Jolla. He passed Palomar Medical Center. He passed, and this is the one that ended him in the best possible way, he passed Arbor Grove Medical Pavilion in Temecula, a 42-bed skilled nursing hospice facility that I opened in 2022, and that has an attached urgent care clinic that is open 24 hours a day. He drove past a hospital I personally owned. The sign was lit, Arbor Grove Memory Care and Medical Pavilion. I watched him watch the sign pass. He did not slow down. I kept my eyes half closed. I let my breathing slow. I let my head roll slightly against the window. Every performance cue I'd practiced in front of a mirror for 3 weeks, I delivered it. In the woods above Lake Elsinore, on a gravel pull-off about 2.3 miles off Highway 74, Grant stopped the car. If you think you would have seen this coming. You wouldn't, that's the scary part. Keep watching. He got out, walked around, opened my door, unbuckled my seatbelt, and for one long moment he just stood there looking down at me, not with guilt, not with doubt, with the vague, irritated expression of a man who had waited a long time for this and was still deciding whether it felt worth it. I slid out of the seat, my knees hit gravel, I had rehearsed this, my hands were numb, my eyes were unfocused, my voice was thin. "Grant," I whispered, "please." He knelt down, he looked at me, he said it. "I poisoned you, Brooke, I found your will, you were convenient. Now you're my way out." He said more, he talked for 11 minutes. He talked about Jenna, he talked about a cafe in Hillcrest, he talked about the debt. He talked about how he'd never loved me, how he'd always resented me, how the galas and the magazine features and the awards had been suffocating. He talked about how I'd made him feel small, how I'd made him feel invisible. He said, at one point, and Alma's Escalade recorded it, and my Apple Watch recorded it, and Priya's office cloud archive preserved it in triplicate, he said. I took $217,000 out of our joint account in January. I moved it to a Nevada LLC. When you're gone, it comes back to me as loan repayment. The will takes care of the rest. I walk away with $47 million and a clean story. I am so tired of being your husband. I kept my eyes half closed. My wrist was warm. The recording indicator on my Apple Watch pulsed steadily against my skin. He stood up. He brushed off his pants. He said, "I'm sorry, Brooke, I really am," in a tone that meant the opposite. He got back in the car, he closed the door, he started the engine, he pulled out onto the gravel, his headlights swept across the trees. And for 84 seconds, I counted, I was alone on the side of a road above a lake I'd never seen in daylight, lying on cold stones, while my husband of 11 years drove away from a body he believed would be found in 72 hours by a hiker or a ranger. Then headlights came back. A white Escalade. Alma's, she didn't run. She walked, steady footsteps on gravel. She knelt down beside me. She put 2 fingers on my carotid. She'd trained as an EMT in 2003 before she became my COO, and she said very quietly, "Pulse is 78. Pupils reactive. You're fine. Stay down." "I'm calling Marisol." I opened my eyes. I looked up at her. I said, "Alma, I got him." She said, "You got him, Brooke. You got every word of it." Alma drove me to the very facility Grant had passed 40 minutes earlier. Arbor Grove Memory Care and Medical Pavilion in Temecula. We came in through the staff entrance. Dr. Marisol Vega was waiting. She'd driven down from San Diego the moment Alma called her from the gas station at 7:30 p.m. The pavilion has 42 private rooms. 2 of them are designated executive recovery suites, originally intended for family members of residents who needed a place to stay during hospice transitions. Room 208 had been prepared since Monday. New linens, a privacy protocol. A nursing team briefed that a VIP patient would arrive between 9 p.m. and midnight, and that her presence in the facility was not to be entered into the EMR, not to be discussed, not to be acknowledged to anyone outside of Dr. Vega, Alma, Priya, and the 2 nurses Marisol had hand-selected, Iyanla Brooks and Teresa Domings, both of whom had worked for me for over 9 years. At 10:14 p.m., Marisol ran my blood. Diphenhydramine level, 142 ng/ml, elevated, consistent with recent exposure, far below a toxic dose because I had swallowed almost none of it. The comparison to my 4 p.m. baseline panel was exhaustive and irrefutable. Grant had dosed me. The pharmacology proved it. The napkin, which Alma had bagged and tagged from the restaurant table, contained crystallized diphenhydramine residue at a concentration consistent with a deliberately ground adult over-the-counter tablet preparation. At 10:47 p.m., Priya arrived. She brought 3 envelopes. Envelope 1, a certified copy of my real will with the pour-over provision as recorded in her office safe on January 19, 2025. Grant was no longer sole beneficiary. He had never been, not since that date. He had just seen a decoy. Envelope 2, a petition for emergency divorce on grounds of attempted spousal homicide, with affidavits from Alma, Dr. Vega, Bernadette Okoye, and myself. Envelope 3, an incident report package for the San Diego County Sheriff's Office, including the Apple Watch audio file, the GPS track of Grant's Mercedes from Il Forno to the gravel pull-off and back, Bernadette's 6-month surveillance file, the Wells Fargo compliance flag from March 3rd, the Nevada LLC financial trail, the photograph of Jenna Reed in the counterfeit Arbor Grove polo, and Grant's text message to Jenna at 9:47 p.m., sent from the Mercedes on the drive home, which read in full, "It's done, baby. Give it a week. I'll come see you Friday. I love you." I read that text at 11:02 p.m. while sitting up in bed in room 208, drinking a cup of ginger tea Iyanla had brought me, wearing a white cotton robe from the facility's linen closet. "It's done, baby. Give it a week. I'll come see you Friday." I looked at Alma. Alma looked at me. I said, "Alma, he thinks he's a widower right now." She said, "He does, Brooke." I said, "Then let's let him be one for a little while." Detective Raquel Medina of the San Diego County Sheriff's Office arrived at Arbor Grove Medical Pavilion at 11:47 p.m. She'd been briefed on the drive over by Priya. Medina was 44, Filipino-American, 17 years on the force. She sat in a guest chair in room 208 and she listened to the Apple Watch audio on Alma's laptop, and she did not say anything for a full 7 minutes. Then she said, "Mrs. Haverson, I am going to ask you a question that would normally be an ethical problem for me. But because you are very clearly not in danger, and because your husband believes you are dead, I want to give you a choice. Do you want us to arrest him tonight, or do you want us to wait 36 hours and let him walk himself further into this?" I said, "Detective, what would you recommend?" She said professionally, "Arrest him tonight. Because tonight he's at the peak of believing he got away with it, and that's when he makes mistakes. And if I asked you to wait? She thought about it, then she said, he's going to go to Jenna Reed's apartment tomorrow evening. He's going to confess to her, not the murder, but the marriage ending, the insurance money coming through, the future he promised her. We can wire her apartment tonight with her consent. If she says yes, he walks himself into a federal conspiracy case. If she says no, we take him in when he walks out of her building. Either way, he goes down. Either way. I said, talk to Jenna. Detective Medina left room 208 at 12:24 a.m. She drove to a small apartment in Hillcrest. She knocked on the door of a 22-year-old designer boutique clerk. She spent 2 hours in that apartment. She showed Jenna Reed the surveillance file. She showed her the texts Grant had sent over 11 months. She showed her the Sheriff's Department chain of custody report on the crystallized diphenhydramine from a wine napkin recovered at a harbor restaurant on Tuesday evening. Jenna Reed cried. She cried for a very long time. Then she said, and I have a copy of the audio of this. He told me his wife was a nursing home manager. He told me he was going to leave her in the spring. He told me we were going to open a cafe. I didn't know she was. Detective Medina said, Jenna, listen. None of this is on you. He picked you because you were young and kind and he could lie to you. You are a victim of this too, but I need your help now. Will you help us? Jenna helped. Wednesday, March 25, 2026. Grant Lawson slept until 11 a.m. in our house on Camino Alto. He made himself coffee. He did not call the police. He did not file a missing persons report. He waited. He texted Jenna at 2:17 p.m., miss you, bad day, need to see you. Tonight? Jenna, under Detective Medina's coaching, texted back, yes baby, my place. 7 p.m. Bring wine. At 6:48 p.m., Grant arrived at Jenna's apartment. A wire was running. 2 detectives were parked across the street, 3 more in an unmarked van at the end of the block. Grant kissed Jenna. He sat on her couch. He drank the wine she poured him, non-alcoholic. She was following orders. He cried. He told her his wife had died in her sleep from a heart attack last night at the restaurant. He told her he was so heartbroken, baby, but I told you, didn't I tell you God had a plan for us? He told her the insurance would clear in 30 days. He told her he loved her. He told her to start looking for cafe locations in Hillcrest. He was arrested at 8:14 p.m. walking out of Jenna's building. Detective Medina met him at the curb with 3 uniformed deputies. Medina said, Mr. Grant Lawson, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and spousal battery with a controlled substance. You have the right to remain silent. Grant said, my wife is dead. Medina said, is she? Grant said, she died last night. Medina said, Mr. Lawson, your wife is sitting in bed in a memory care facility in Temecula drinking ginger tea. She has been awake for the last 23 hours. And she would like her house keys back. She didn't actually say that last sentence, but Priya told me later that Medina thought it. Grant Lawson was booked into San Diego Central Jail at 9:41 p.m. on Wednesday, March 25, 2026. Bail was denied. Flight risk, the judge said at the bond hearing Thursday morning. The evidence was overwhelming. The Apple Watch recording, the wire from Jenna's apartment, the Wells Fargo compliance flag, the Nevada LLC trail, the diphenhydramine in the napkin, the GPS track, the Bernadette file. The text message to Jenna at 9:47 p.m. It's done, baby. That one text alone, Priya told me, was the kind of evidence prosecutors cry about. Grant hired a defense attorney, a local man named Whit Carpenter, who charged $850 an hour and who had, unfortunately for Grant, once been Priya's law school classmate. Whit called Priya on Friday morning. He said, Priya, what's the offer? Priya said, there is no offer. There will be no offer. The DA is charging every count to the maximum. Your client drove past his wife's hospital on the way to leave her for dead. The jury is going to hear that. I am going to make sure the jury hears that 17 different ways in opening statements alone. Whit said, Priya. He's 49 years old. Priya said, he'll be 67 when he's eligible for parole. Tell him to cooperate on Jenna's immunity deal, and the sentencing judge may consider it. Grant cooperated. Jenna received full victim witness immunity. Grant's cooperation did him very little good. The DA charged him with attempted murder, Class A felony, poisoning with intent to kill, separate count, spousal battery with great bodily injury enhancement, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud connected to the Nevada LLC structure, grand theft for the $217,000 he'd moved in January, identity theft for the attempted Wells Fargo joint survivorship account, 6 counts, 29-year sentence if convicted on all. He took a plea deal in August 2026, 23 years, state prison, no possibility of parole before 2044. He will be 67 when he walks out, if he walks out. The dominoes fell in order. Jenna Reed walked away clean. She testified at the preliminary hearing. She told the truth. She had no criminal liability. Jenna returned to her boutique job and 6 months later opened a small coffee stand in North Park. Not a cafe, not yet, but a start, with a microloan she qualified for through a women's small business program. She did not use Grant's money. She did not accept any settlement offer. I sent her a handwritten note in October 2026 that read, "Jenna, he picked you because you were young and kind. You are still young and kind. Build your cafe. Brooke." She wrote back once. She said thank you. I never heard from her again. I didn't need to. The $217,000 Grant had moved to Silver Ridge Holdings in Nevada, was recovered through civil forfeiture, and returned to the marital estate in November, which per our final divorce decree, granted on grounds of attempted spousal homicide, with every marital debt assigned solely to Grant and every remaining asset awarded entirely to me, was now my estate alone. Grant received nothing, not a dollar, not a cent. Priya had filed for divorce on Wednesday morning while Grant was still sleeping in our bed. The final decree was entered in July 2026. He learned about it from his cell in Donovan State Prison. The house on Camino Alto sold in December 2026. I didn't want it. I moved to a smaller place on Rosemont Circle in La Jolla, 2 bedrooms, a garden, a view of the ocean from the kitchen window while I drink my coffee in the morning. I don't need more than that. I never did. Arbor Grove opened facility number 8 in Santa Barbara in May 2027. Dr. Marisol Vega is now Chief Medical Officer for the entire network. Alma Ruiz is now President and Chief Operating Officer. I gave her equity that would choke a smaller man. Priya Banerjee is still my general counsel and my closest friend on this earth. Detective Raquel Medina was promoted to sergeant in September 2026. I wrote a letter. A very long, very specific letter about what a good detective does on a Tuesday night when a CEO walks into her world bleeding lies. And the 487 people who work at Arbor Grove. The aides, the nurses, the cooks, the housekeepers, the front desk staff, the drivers, the physical therapists. They received, in the first quarter distribution of 2027, an expanded employee equity payout from the Arbor Grove Employee Trust that represented, on average, $14,200 per employee. The provision Priya put in my will in January 2025, the pour-over clause that was meant to trigger if Grant ever killed me, turned into a living benefit program for the people who actually built the company. It was the best thing Grant Lawson ever tried to do for anyone. He just didn't know he was doing it. It's April 2027 now, a little over a year since the gravel pull-off. I sit on my patio on Rosemont Circle most mornings. I drink black coffee. I read the paper in print because old habits stay. Some mornings I walk down to the beach at the end of the block and I sit on a bench and I watch the water. Nobody recognizes me there. I am a woman in her late 40s in jeans and a sweatshirt, drinking coffee from a travel mug, watching pelicans. I was on that bench one morning in February when a young woman sat down next to me. She was maybe 26, 27. She was crying, quietly, the way women cry when they don't want to bother anyone. I didn't look at her directly. I let her have her space. Then after a while, she said, to no one, to herself, to the water, "I don't know what to do." I said, "About what, sweetheart?" She said, my husband. I think he might be, I don't know. I just have a feeling in my chest. Like something's wrong, but I can't prove anything. And everyone tells me I'm being crazy. I sat with that for a long time, then I said, honey, listen to me. The feeling in your chest is not being crazy. The feeling in your chest is the smartest part of you trying to get your attention before the rest of you catches up. She looked at me for the first time. She had mascara running down one cheek. She said, what do I do? I said, you write everything down. You make copies of important papers. You tell one person you trust, one. Not your mother, not your sister, not your best friend from college. One person whose judgment you trust more than your own right now. You have that person. She thought about it. She said, my boss, maybe. She's like a second mother. I said, then you tell her, and you let her help you. You document, you don't confront him, you don't accuse him. You just watch, you listen, you write. And when you know, you know. And the day you know, you go, you don't argue, you don't negotiate. You go. She said, what if I'm wrong? I said, then you apologize to him later from a safe distance and you feel foolish for a week. That's the cost of being wrong. But if you're right and you stay, there is no cost, honey, because there is no later. There is only what he does to you. She cried some more. I sat with her. Then after a while she said, why are you telling me all this? I said, because someone told me once. I almost didn't listen, and I almost died. She looked at me, really looked. She said, who told you? I thought about that for a while. I said, a woman named Adelita Mendoza. In 1997, she ran a memory care facility in Spring Valley. She watched me for 3 weeks, and then she sat me down at her kitchen table, and she told me that the boy I was dating was going to be the worst mistake of my life unless I listened to what my chest was telling me. I listened. I broke up with him on a Saturday. 2 weeks later, he threw a brick through his new girlfriend's window. I've never forgotten it. The young woman nodded. She wiped her face. She said, thank you. I said, go call your boss, honey. She got up, she walked away. I don't know her name. I don't know what happened to her marriage. I hope she's okay. I hope she listened. That's the thing about all of it. About Grant. About what happened. About why I sat in a hospital bed at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night in Temecula and decided to let my husband believe I was dead for 23 hours. It wasn't about revenge. It was never about revenge. Women prepare. Women watch. Women write things down. Women keep receipts. Women build a company for 22 years and make sure 487 employees are protected in every contingency. Women update a will quietly on a Tuesday in January and slip a pour-over clause onto a page so that even if the worst thing happens, the work survives. Women text one word, nightcap asterisk, to a COO who has spent 12 years earning that single word alert. Women rehearse a recording shortcut in front of a mirror until it becomes muscle memory. Women stand in a restaurant bathroom at 7:34 p.m. and double-tap their watch because they have finally understood what is coming. Men think they are killing us. They are not killing us. They are watching us finish a project we started 3 years ago. He thought I was convenient. He thought I was replaceable. He thought I wouldn't see it coming. He was wrong, because while he was planning my death, I was already planning his ending. Listen to your chest. Write everything down, keep receipts, and when you know, go. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and join our community for more true life stories. We'll see you in the next one.